Hey, Walking Dead fans, welcome back to the channel. Let's go over a comparison of the comics versus the show. Episode 5 from season 10. Spoiler alert, of course, if you're not caught up to the show, and for the comic as well. So we've just seen on The Walking Dead, season 10, episode 5, Negan has been let out of the jail cell at Alexandria by somebody we don't know. That's a mystery I'll go over in the next video. But Negan is out, and one comparison of the comic is Brandon. Brandon let him out in the comic, but Brandon in the show is a different character and did not let him out. We learned that in episode 5. In the TV show, Brandon was the kid of a savior, and the savior had been under Negan and was talking about how great being under Negan was, taught him the whistle, all that kind of stuff. And eventually, Brandon became the guard of Negan, and here we are with Brandon, the Brandon of the TV show. In the comic, Brandon Rose was the son of Tammy Rose and Earl, who, of course, are in the show. The blacksmith guy, Tammy, had her head on a pike. Their son in the TV show, though, was Kenneth. If you remember Kenneth in the first episode, he got bitten and kicked by a horse. He died. That led to, of course, Gregory trying to get Earl drunk and kill Maggie. And that ended up with Maggie hanging Gregory. So in the comics, Brandon's parents were Tammy and Earl. But what did happen in the comic and who was Brandon? Let's go over that real quick. Again, spoiler for the comic. So Brandon's backstory in the comic being that is his parents, his dad was killed by Rick. So what happened is the Whisperers killed his mom, Rick killed his dad, and that pitted him against Rick and the Whisperers, of course. So he was tempted then to let Negan out of his cell and under the plan, or at least his plan, to take Negan and them go to the Whisperers and tell them of Rick's plan. Rick is gaining the militia and arms against the Whisperers. He's about to attack. And Brandon knows all of that. He wants to go tell the Whisperers about it so they can attack him first. He really wants Rick to die, and he thinks Negan wants Rick to die as well. So he thought, Negan's on my side. He should think like me. But, of course, as we'll see, that's not the case. But so Brandon lets Negan out in the comic because he is against Rick, because he blames him for his father's death. Rick did kill him. And he blames the Whisperers for his mother's death. They did kill her. She was one of the heads on the pikes. So the motivation was, let Negan out. They're going to start some shit. Quick, let me throw this in there in the same comic on a page. The thing with Eugene on the radio talking to the Commonwealth, that's already started. And so as you can see here, there's some text bubbles. They're like, there are people here who've been here since the beginning. I showed up around 3 years ago with another group I met up with sometime before that. I started in Texas, but we come from all over in this place. Over. Started in Texas, you're starting to give me clues. Over. So the voice on the radio goes on to say a little bit about the place that she's at, and some other stuff starts happening. But anyway, I just wanted to fill you in as everything else is going on. The Whisper War, this stuff, letting Negan out and all that. As far as the comic goes, at the same time, Eugene is secretly talking back and forth to this lady on the radio, and it ends up being their connection to Commonwealth. But on to the pages of Brandon and Negan. So pretty much just like in the show in episode 5, in the comic frames, Brandon gets Negan's jacket back to him. But I think at this point in time, in the comic book, Dwight has Lucille. But, you know, in the TV show, Negan said, no, just hang on to the jacket for a minute. I don't want to be recognized. In the comic, he's like, man, I felt naked without it. So Brandon's pretty much like, we got to get going. And Negan, he's cussing the whole way through here. And I won't read it verbatim like that. But he's like, what? And he's like, the Whispers, we got to go get to them. And Negan's all like, you didn't think this through, did you? And the kid's like, what? So Negan always, you know, being the leader type, I guess, he kind of puts one down on Brandon right there. And the Brandon in the comic is just more of a wimp or a wuss, I guess you could say, where the Brandon in the TV show was just crazy, just off his lid crazy in my opinion. So Brandon goes on to say, you hate Rick just as much as I do. You want this too, right? And so Negan's thinking a minute, and he's like, yeah, just point me in the direction, but just remember I'm the one calling the shots. And if you remember in the show, Negan asked Brandon about bringing some food, some granola, and he grabs a bite and gives it back. So seems like Brandon kind of thought it through a little more in the TV show, because in the comic, he's like, man, I wish we'd brought more food. I'm starving. But then Negan's like, I'm going to have to kill you, aren't I? And of course, it's a rhetorical question, but the kid answers no. So then Negan's like, why'd you stop? And they've just reached the border with the pike. So the kid's like, this must have been where it happened, where they put my mom's head on a stick. And Negan's all like, come on, we're burning daylight. But then the kid's all crying and stuff. And Negan's like, I can be inconsiderate sometimes. So he actually gives Brandon a hug. And Brandon's saying, Whispers killed my mom. Rick killed my dad. I hate them all. I want them to kill each other. I want them all dead. So then Negan says, that's the plan, kid. That's the plan. Or rather, as he drives a knife into the kid's heart, that was your plan. So as he leaves Brandon there to die, dead, to reanimate, he walks on past the border toward the Whispers. And he doesn't have Lucille at this point. But as in the show, kind of in the comic, he goes on to rouse up. He meets the Whispers kind of on a street, not in the woods like he did in the show. Just he had Lucille banging some heads in. In the comic, it was more he was kind of on a deserted street in a little town, kind of it looked like. But since we haven't seen the full-on Negan meeting Beta, Negan, I'm sure, gets taken back to Alpha, gets taken back to the camp, just like in the comics. But let me know what you thought about it all in the comments below. I'm going to wrap this one up. That was the comparison right there. If you have any questions, let me know. And also the next video coming up, kind of something on everybody's radar, is who let Negan out? And we'll look at that question a little bit next video. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more dead stuff.